What's up folks, David here, and if you're watching this video, there's a chance you may have seen this other ancient video of little babyface David taking a spin on this classic fiddle tune, Big Sciota. This thing came out way back in 2013, and it was really just when I was starting to get serious about playing the mandolin, but since this thing was released, it's become probably the most popular thing I've ever put out in my entire career so far. I just peaked too soon, I guess. But also since then, I've gotten tons of requests for the transcription of this arrangement, so that's why we're here today. Honestly though, when I look back on this now, I can definitely see the rough edges a lot more clear, but it's still a fond memory for me because Big Sciota was one of the first fiddle tunes that I really ran through the paces. When I was first learning this tune, I spent a lot of time learning that melody up and down the neck in different octaves. I transcribed a Sam Bush solo for this tune, and I also sat down and composed my own solo for that very video. And I know some of you might be thinking like, wait, isn't it cheating to come up with something in advance? I thought all the stuff was supposed to be improvised. And in fact, that's exactly what I thought for a long time until I figured out that some of my favorite musicians didn't have that same reservation. Learning from their example and through solo composition exercises like this, I've kind of come to this two-sided coin analogy for improvisation. On one side, yes, you have to put yourself out there and try new things in the moment or else you won't get better at improvising. But on the other hand, if you're not spending a lot of time in your personal practice to come up with new musical ideas for songs, then you'll always be playing the same old things. Plus, once you've worked out a solo for a tune like this, it's kind of like you have a safety net, right? You almost feel more confident going out and trying new things because you know you can fall back on what you've already planned out if you need to. So apologies to any improv purists out there, but that's what we're gonna do in this video. First, I'm gonna show you how to play the chords and the melody to Big Sciota, just like I did back in the day, and then we're gonna tackle this solo that I came up with for the tune. We'll break things down and I'll walk you through a bit of my thought process as I compose this solo, so hopefully you can go and compose your own solos for other tunes as well. So grab your mandolin, grab your time machine, and let's play this tune like it's 2013 again. All right, and let's get right to it. Here are the chords for this one. We're in the key of G and we'll be using these 4 chords. Here are 4 open chord shapes to check out if you're not familiar with them already. Also, as always in that bluegrass jam, you might want to use these chop chord shapes to get that bluegrass bark on the backbeat. So here are those same 4 chords with our chop chord shapes. Once you've got these shapes under your fingers, let's come over to the transcription and check out the chord progression because some of these chords happen in interesting places. And for the first line of this A section here, we have these quick half measure chord changes from G to D, back to G again for a full measure. And these go by pretty fast, so take your time as you're working on these. Then on the second line, we've got this pretty standard chord progression of G to C to D, back to G again. Now onto the B section here, and this is where things get a little bit tricky, right? We start with the G chord for 1 measure, but we quickly switch to a D chord here for 2 measures. And from this point on in this section, it almost feels like we're messing with the timing because we're switching chords at unequal points in the phrases. But the cool thing is that it actually works out evenly in the end. Next, we go to a C major chord for 2 measures, which again feels a little bit uneven in the phrasing department. But then we have 1 measure on E minor, followed by another measure of D, which brings us back to G right where we want it to be at the end of the tune. But if you've played this tune at the jam before, you'll know this brings up the age-old question of which chord should come first, the C or the E minor, because a lot of people have different opinions about this. And to answer that question, we're gonna have to look a little bit into the background info of this tune. Some people might know this tune under the original name Big Sciota, like with a Y, and that's a name that a lot of people use in the old-time traditions to refer to this tune. I believe it was named after some river in Ohio where there's a variety of local pronunciations like Sciota, Sciota, Sciota. I don't know. Anyways, as far as I can tell, one of the first fiddlers to record Big Sciota was this guy named Burl Hammonds from West Virginia. And most people who learn to play it from him will swap the C and the E minor chords. So people who refer to this tune as Sciota will probably play the E minor first, followed by the C major chord. But in 1993, Russ Barenberg, Edgar Meyer, and Jerry Douglas recorded this tune with Sam Bush on their record Skip, Hop, and Wobble. And they choose to use the spelling Sciota. This is actually that same Sam Bush track that I transcribed like I mentioned earlier. These guys take more of a bluegrass approach to the tune, and I think it's this recording in particular that's responsible for bringing Big Sciota over from the old-time circles into the classic bluegrass fiddle tune repertoire. And you guessed it, they use a C chord first, followed by an E minor chord. So probably way more back info than you bargained for, but as a rule of thumb, you can think different spelling, different chords. Big Sciota, old time, will go E minor to C, and then Big Sciota, bluegrass, will go C to E minor. But since we're talking about improvising here, we'll stick to the bluegrass changes for now. And by the way, check out the links to all these reference recordings in the description below. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's actually learn the melody now. And just for a refresher, here's my version of the tune again. Like I mentioned before, we're in the key of G here, so let's dust off that old G major scale and get it back into our fingers again. So here are all the notes that we can play in the G major scale here in our open position. With that framework in mind, let's come over to the transcription now and check out this A section. And by the way, you'll see the transcription on screen throughout the video, so no worries there. But if you want your own personal PDF copy, you can grab one at my Patreon page. And by the way, you'll be able to also download MP3 play-along tracks that you're hearing here in this video, plus tons of other mandolin transcriptions with more stuff coming every week. So check it out at the link above. Anyways, back to Big Sciota now. And this melody does have some repetitive ideas in it, right? We use this interval of a third a lot, and we always come back to that G note on the 5th fret of the D string. But there's no outright repetition within these phrases, right? It's all new material as you go through the tune, which does make this a little bit harder to learn and to memorize. But just like any other tune, I'd say the best thing to do is to break this up into 2 measured chunks and try to memorize each bite-sized piece as you go along from the start. Besides that aspect though, the A section is pretty straightforward. We just got this little grace note slide over the C chord where I'm using my ring finger to slide from the 5th fret to the 7th fret on the A string while I let that E string ring out. We'll also follow up that slide with an extra upstroke on that E string to keep the 8th notes going. And we've also got these G major double stops that happen on the 1st and the 2nd ending of each section here. So just be sure you're alternating your pick strokes for these 8th notes, even though we're playing through 2 sets of strings here. But that's about it. So once you feel comfortable, let's try this section once together, a bit slower with the music on screen. For the B section now, we've got some tricky fingerings right out of the gate, and I like to shift up with my index finger to the 3rd fret on that E string right on the downbeat of this section. Then I can stay up there and play all these notes until the end of the 3rd measure where I shift back down from the 3rd fret to the 2nd fret with my index finger here on the E string. Now you're totally welcome to stay in the open position and not worry about any of that stuff, right? You'll just have to play your 4th finger on the 7th fret of the E string. But personally, I would prefer to use my ring finger to my pinky any day of the week. It just feels like a more reliable option. So that's why I go through all this extra headache here. Next, we have a couple more of those grace note slides over the C chord and the E minor chord. For some reason, I didn't play the open E string over the E minor chord, but you're totally welcome to do it either way. And the weird thing here is that the melody over the C chord and the E minor chord is very similar, but the repetition is happening unevenly through our 2 measure phrases, just like the chords. So it's gonna feel a little lopsided or maybe a little bit crooked, even though we're just dealing with a standard 8 measure section here. So take your time as you work through each 2 measure chunk, but when you're ready, let's play through the B section here once together. All right, on to the main course of this lesson. Let's dissect this solo from that old video. And to start with, let's just listen down again to see what's going on. Now, if you've never transcribed a solo or written a solo of your own, I know this can feel like an overwhelming task, but when you break things down and zero in on the details, it's actually not that bad. Honestly, all I did for the solo was use the melody as a reference, then I just picked different notes on the G major scale to come up with variations or new melodic ideas. And at a real mechanical level here, all I did was hunt and peck for things that I liked, right? In fact, what I did was I sat down with a piece of paper, I wrote out 32 blank measures with the corresponding chords above those measures, and then I just wrote it out. I followed my ear one note at a time. But let's check things out in more detail here, starting with the A section. And for these first couple measures of the solo, I stick pretty close to the melody with just a few connecting notes on the scale. Then on the next two measures here, I get away from the melody a bit. I use the G major scale to walk up to that high G note on the 3rd fret of your E string. Then on the next little melodic passage, we'll end up sliding with your ring finger up to the 7th fret of the E. Down on the second line here, after that slide, we'll stay up in this slightly higher position to play through the next couple measures before using this little pull off as an opportunity to shift back down to the open position here. And these two measures here at the end of the line are very similar to the turnaround phrase in the original melody, right? All we're doing is we're adding in a little hammer-on triplet, and then we're ending the phrase on this long half note open G. All right, you with me so far? We've just tackled the first A section, but let's see what happens on the repeat now. So for this first whole line, I'm just playing a bunch of notes in G major, right? And I'm trying to take advantage of that built-in interval of a third that we had in the original melody. So even if it doesn't sound exactly like the melody, hopefully you can see that motivic derivation, as it were, from the original. On the next line, we've got some repeated rhythms for these two measures, along with some hammer-on triplets, and watch out for that F natural here. And then the last two measures is just another variation on that turnaround melody from before. All right, with all that in mind, let's actually give this a shot. I'll play through the entire A section solo here a bit slower with the music on screen. Now onto the B section here, and things get even more tricky as we start shifting further up the neck and getting further away from the melody too. To start this section, we're actually sliding up with your index finger to the 3rd fret of the E string, followed shortly by another slide with your middle finger up to the 7th fret of the E string. Then we're camping up here in this position for the rest of the line. And check out these finger numbers above the standard notation for a little bit of extra guidance. Then at the end of that 4th measure, we're using this open E string as an opportunity to shift back to our first position here. This next line starts off with a nod to Sam Bush because this is the same triplet lick that he plays in his solo for the tune off that Skip Hop and Wobble record. After that though, we're just using a bunch of notes on the G major scale to get to the last measure here, where we're using a G major arpeggio to shift even further up the neck than before. On this next line, with our index finger on the 10th fret of the A string, we'll stay up here until shifting down to the 9th fret with our index here in the 2nd measure. Then we're just playing this lick around the bluegrass chop chord shape. First for the D major chord here, then for the last measure on this line, we'll shift that same lick down 2 frets for your C major chord with your index on the 7th fret of the A. And we'll also play that bluesy sounding F natural here to keep your fingerings the same as before. Here we'll use that open E string as another chance to shift back down to the open position, and then we're pretty much home free, right? This last line is almost identical to the original melody with just a few melodic embellishments. I know that's a lot, but you got this. Let's try out the B section solo together as well. Let me just say a job well done to you for getting through that mess. And now that you've got this in your finger, see if you can memorize it and work it up to speed to play along with that original video. And once you've got a solo for a tune like this mastered, it's kind of like the floodgates of improv possibilities get flung wide open, right? Well, I guess if you wanted to, you could just play this solo note for note next time you're at the jam. And even though this video was popular, I'm sure no one would recognize it. Even if they did, more power to you. But my hope is that by seeing this melody in a new light and expanding your vocabulary through this solo transcription, you can feel more comfortable starting to connect connect the dots in new ways. And for your final assignment for this tune, I challenge you to do just that. So take all the ideas from the melody and from my solo and use it as a springboard to come up with your own solo for this tune. Now you can sit down with a piece of paper like I did and write something out, or you can just figure something out by ear and memorize it as you go along. But for the sake of this exercise, I'd say try to come up with something really specific and memorize it note for note. That way you can pull it out at a moment's notice when you're at that jam. Plus, once you've composed and learned yet another solo for this tune, you'll have an even bigger safety net to fall back on, right? You'll have more options to choose from whenever you're improvising in the moment. And at the end of the day, you might choose to play something totally different, but you're always going to be able to improvise better over a tune like this when you spent some time really digging in deep like this. Anyways, I feel like this was a really self-indulgent video. You know, hey, come learn my old personal arrangement of a tune and it will change your life. No, but thanks for humoring me. I hope it was helpful. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a comment, or join us over on Patreon for even more mandolin content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.